Some selling skills are easy to learn or easier to learn, and other ones take time. And the one we're going to talk about today is hard to learn for a lot of reasons. And one of the big ones is that we're under so much pressure, it almost makes it impossible or at least difficult to do. Yet, if you do it, you're able to understand why people will do what they're going to do or not going to do what they should do. And too much is taken for what is said. What is said is nice, but I always followed what people were willing to do. Because what is said is the thing to get out of things, or the things that you want to hear versus what you need to know. Big difference there. And if you can develop this skill, selling becomes a lot easier. Now, how do you develop this skill? And the skill that we're talking about is empathy, not sympathy, not feeling what the other person's feeling, but empathy, this cognitive empathy. What are they thinking? What would you do if you were them? And everyone thinks they're empathetic. Nobody says, well, I'm totally unempathetic. Well, in sales, what are we constantly doing? We're talking about why they need us, talking about the problem we solve, talking about how we're better than the competition. But we may not be there yet, meaning that the client, the person that we're talking with, may not be there yet. They may not feel the pain. They may not care. They may be busy on something else. Now, at the end of this, I'll kind of give you some ideas, because this skill, if you can develop it, makes everything else easier in sales, especially when you're trying to start that conversation and get the meeting. This is kind of the critical skill, because what does our marketing and our sales leaders give us? They give us the talking points, the script, the value proposition, the insights, but that is assuming that the other person has some curiosity and awareness of the problem. And they may, but they may not. Let's get into the interview. This is a great one. This is another senior salesperson that came to us, recommended by the people that work with him. So it's self-vetted. A great guy. Before we get into it, make sure you're checking out our friends over at Co-Video. Video email's one of those ways to convey who you are, to show things other than just the text, just the facts. It's a way of becoming known and liked, and maybe even trusted, be able to show something that the other person cares about and not just you. And compare it to text. Video's the next best thing to being there. So try it out at covideo.com. Tell me you heard it on the podcast. And I'll sum up the interview and give everybody an update on the courses. If you're in the courses, we had a fantastic office hours yesterday. Great examples, a must listen to. Also, there was tons of great one-on-ones this week. So check them out. Office hours is the second to the last chapter. One-on-ones is the very last chapter. Here we go. Hey, Brian, welcome to the show. As a way of getting started, give us a little background on yourself.
Yeah, Brian, I appreciate it. It's absolutely great to be here. So just from the human side, Brian Duvall, Cincinnati, born and raised. I'm a Cincinnati native, married to a beautiful wife, live in the suburbs of Cincinnati in a little ranch home, but it's two stories. There's her story and mine, right? So,
And your story is underground, right?
Yeah, that's right. My story I keep to myself. So, no, just super blessed. 3 kids, 20, 17, and 4. The 4-year-old was not what everyone anticipates. It was deliberate. She was adopted, and she's awesome. And then we've got Tribulation and Sasquatch, the 2 dogs to round out the bunch there. And so, yeah, professionally, though, been selling in this market IT solutions for about 2 decades. I thought I was going to be a chemical engineer, and wound up after too much calc and physics and chemistry in business school, and wound up in sales, and specifically technology sales. First gig was one of the bloody knuckle boiler room gigs, telecom. And, it was all about how many business cards you collected, how many appointments you set, how many dials you made. And ironically, I called on the branch office of who would be my employer for 18 years on the day that an executive was there. And someone in the lobby made a mistake of letting me know that he was in the building. So we got to connect, and they recruited me. And so I had an 18-year career with an IT solutions provider out of London, a multinational firm. Of those 18 years, 14 consecutive years, President's Club.
Wow.
Just fantastic performance, and just super blessed in that respect. On my absolute best year, in 2019, I left and went to a different firm, $2 billion solution provider, digital delivery company out of Chicago, selling IT solutions. And that's where I've been hanging out here for the last 22 months or so. And that's a little bit about my career.
Cool. Well, help me with the chemical engineering thing, because if you can cut that, because that's like double E, right? That's like really hard.
Well, I don't know that I did, right? So that was my sophomore year when I said this is enough, and I switched. So, and it was a couple of things. It was, I wasn't really like a lot of the folks to my left and right, and I really, you put so much pressure on kids to make a decision about a career. I think I read an article in the Cincinnati Enquirer that said it was the top paying 4-year degree. So I was like, okay, I'll do that. So I think that's how that happened, but wound up in sales. So.
Yeah, well, mine wasn't much. I looked at the back of the help wanted ads, and there was 15 pages for software engineers, and about half a page for everybody else.
Done.
But what did you like about, or what did you not like about sales when you first got into it?
Oh man, my original outside sales gig, selling telecom, very crowded space. There's not much I liked about it, and it was a proving ground. I wouldn't trade the experience for anything. As a parent, I wish I could gift that experience to my children. Just understanding rejection and perspectives and persistence, just the whole nine. I'd sit in the parking lot of a high rise, for an hour and a half, just sweating, not wanting to go in, and planning how I was going to skip between floors before security caught up with me, and explained that there was no soliciting in the building. Right. Once I got into what I consider a less one and done, like one call close type sale that was more strategic, and where I got to learn about business and align solutions to the business, that changed. And it really became something that I really enjoyed and got a lot of worth out of, and enjoyed just relating with individuals and their goals and companies and all the nuances that make them successful, and coming alongside of them and empowering them with technology solutions that drove outcomes. And so since then, I've scratched, management, leadership itches in other ways outside of business. And I still do it, to a degree through mentoring programs or public speaking or whatever. But in reality, I just enjoy having my sleeves rolled up and digging in with clients. Yeah.
And what about that turned you on? Was it that you went from kind of the push type of sale, commoditized price, to something where you felt you were really adding value to?
Yeah, I mean, well said. And it stretched me, and it helped me grow, which is so funny. I mean, I meet all these young guys, and I see myself, and I want to impart, and it's, that there's some things that only experience can teach, right? And when you look at this whole idea of blind spots, a big part of your blind spots is, the aperture is narrow when you don't have experience for what's behind you, and it gets wider as you have experience because you've just lived. Now, I remember when I came in meeting some of my peers, and I was super young when I got into technology sales, didn't really know what I was doing at all. And I looked at most of them, and candidly, I just said, these guys can do it. This is going to be a laydown, right? And so, but I found out pretty quickly that they had a lot of momentum just from their experience and what they've learned through the years. And so growing has been a huge advantage, or rather benefit, I should say, of just being in sales.
Well, that's it. When you're first into it, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And you see other people being successful and you say, how hard can that be?
Yeah. Yeah. You're unconsciously incompetent, right?
Yeah.
We all know about about the four stages of learning. And something, Brian, and I'll just jump right in here. I think it's relevant, but something that means a lot to me. Old book translated from the Greek centuries ago. Writer says, walk circumspectly, not as a fool, but as a wise individual. And that's old school language for shrink your blind spots. That's really what that says, right? That circumspect, we think it means like wariness or leeriness, but it's really just prudence and diligence and being judicious, and the idea that you want to have a 360-degree view of what's around you. And so I try to just approach things in what am I doing day in and day out to increase the degrees of that view, whether it's situational, whether it's occupational, whether it's relational, whatever the case may be. And so that really inspires a lot of personal growth. Empathy has been huge, learning and understanding how others think, and that we're each the sum of our experiences. And we don't see things really the way they are all the time. We see things the way we are. Another great quote. And then of course ownership. That's ownership is the antithesis of victimhood, right? And we see this trend today where everyone takes pride in being a victim, and I'm like, well, you could, or you could own it, so it's like and of course there's extenuating circumstances. I don't want anyone to take that as a blanket statement, but just taking ownership and having a maniacal view about I can own this outcome and I can make a difference. So
Yeah. And what I like about that is I try and teach people to learn the whole game of sales.
yeah.
And I think when we first start, like what I heard, going up and down the elevator, it was how to get in and be able to get your commercial through, your pitch, your value prop.
Right.
And then you transition to a conversational sale, multi-step, helping the person out.
Yeah.
And then you kind of made the leap to that awareness of what is the whole game? And can you even conceive of it all?
And we're learning every day, right?
Well,
Never
that's
stop.
it. Yeah. What do you think you would have done differently if you had to do it all over again?
Oh, that's a great question. And, when I think back about it, I think I probably would have had more humility. I mean, candidly, grace just somehow gets multiplied to the humble, right? And you hear the saying, leaders are readers, leaders are learners, but it's easier to say than to apply, right? And criticism, there's always something to be harvested in criticism, always. And if you can get over the emotional part of criticism, and if you can harvest it, it doesn't matter who you are, right? And it's probably faux pas to name names, but take anyone that's highly criticized. We recently came through a political season, a lot of criticism, right? And
a little, yeah,
a little here and there, right? And it didn't matter what side. And the truth is that buried in all of that, at some level, there was a nugget that could be a rising tide and a catalyst for any individual to be better, right? And so I would probably, I think I could have accelerated some of my outcomes by walking a little more humbly, not assuming that I knew, and trying new things. Yeah.
And that is hard, because in sales, like when we're in game, when we're talking with a client, you can't have that doubt, right? You can't. But when you're not, you're off field, you're in the shower room or you're in the locker room. That's when the coach yells at you, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't yell at you when you're on the field. Tells you what to do.
So you have to hold them in healthy tension. You really
have, right? Because if your self-esteem crumbles in front of the client's looking for leadership. They're looking for confidence. They're looking for direction.
Yeah. And that's no bueno at all for your esteem to crumble in front of a client.
No, that doesn't help.
No, and I can't necessarily point to any times that I had that level of meltdown. Let's keep the streak alive. But but it is true. And I come back to empathy, even in that comment, right? everyone talks about qualifying, and we throw every framework at reps. I mean, do me the SWOT analysis, give me the medic, give me this, and did you fill out your TPS report and whatever it is, right? And there is, I understand the desire, the nobility in wanting to see reps thrive, accomplish, giving them a framework. But there's just so much in this business that is caught. It just can't be taught. And you are going to catch it when you're on the field, and when you're fumbling, or when you're running the play, whatever the case may be. And I would say qualification is just a huge, huge thing that is woefully lacking in sales. We limit qualification to things like budget and timelines. And there's 1,000 other contributors, and it's the strength of your advocate. It's what motivates them. And I find myself, Brian, I'm a human study, and people could think I think it's empathy, but they could conceive it as something different. But if I'm walking into an office, I'm looking at, bookshelves and walls. Is it about degrees and accomplishments, or is it about family? It tells you a lot about the buyer. I'm looking at, leather soled dress shoes or rubber soled, right? Is this guy wearing an undershirt? It sounds funny, but it tells you a lot about a person. If that keychain is on the desk, it's a BMW key fob or a Hyundai. It just tells you about where they assign value and how they view themselves. Is it more about getting a job done, or is it more about how I'm perceived internally? Is this an individual that is just sick and tired of missing the soccer and the t-ball games and wants one Saturday off this summer? And how can I map to that and help them obtain that? Or they're aspiring to get promoted, and they need something that's going to be a home run for them. And how do I align to that? And it's literally empathy, because empathy is both emotional and cognitive. And I'm talking about the cognitive part, not the emotional part, right? We got to be careful with emotion, because we serve our employer and we serve our client. And we recognize the needs of both. So it's important that our empathy extends to both from a cognitive perspective. Yeah.
Well, I mean, those are what I call like detective skills.
Yeah.
Because I think too many of us think like census takers. We go door to door with our checklist, like you had the qualification list.
Right.
But today we have the internet. You can tell if a company can afford what you do.
Yeah.
And then the other part about, being able to judge, the judgment skills, not judge a person good or bad, but judge what they care about.
Yeah.
Kind of have a little BS meter.
Right.
So when they say 7, is it 7 or is it 6 or 9? How long did it take to develop those skills? Were they hard earned?
Yeah, they're hard earned, and you have to want to develop them. I came from, so when I was in the boiler room, let's warp back, right? Everything was about the one call close. It was all about steps in a sale. And even still, I see a remnant of that in enterprise B2B sales. Like, what step are you on, or what phase is the deal in?
Yeah.
And I'm like, which facet? It amazes me, because leaders want to mechanize sales.
Of course.
They're like, okay, the client fits in this vertical, this revenue. So we'll stick them on the conveyor belt as the raw material. It'll run through the CRM and the marketing process. PO should be here in 72 hours. And it's like, really? Is that where we're at? And it couldn't be further from the truth. There's so many variables. So back to your question about, what is it like to develop those? I look at selling now as though there are lanes. I tend to boil it down into 7, and that's just part of my heritage. I mean, it could be 5, it could be 35, right? But they're all advancing at the exact same time. You never stop building rapport. You never stop qualifying. You never stop closing. You never stop filling the need, right? You never stop selling the company. And I'll go back to the rapport, because a lot of those things happen very softly and relationally, and without PowerPoint and over lunch and in storytelling. And there's just so many facets. You have to understand when to apply and accelerate, and when to let off and coast. And so anyway, you're getting Brian. This is my philosophy anyway. So yeah.
Well, it's hard to argue with it, because I fight the sales machine fight every day. Every CEO I talk to, he wants it to be a machine.
Right.
And I go, well, put it on the website and put it at a price that doesn't require any human interaction.
Yeah.
Well, we don't want to do that.
Right. Right.
And we've kind of like done that division of labor going mad today. It's like, well, you handle the blonde people, I handle the brown haired people. And it's like, no.
Yeah.
How do you, I don't know if you involve yourself in training other reps or mentoring them, but what do you typically see with them and what do they ask from you?
A lot of times it's deal specific, right? It depends. It depends. Sometimes, you get asked to mentor folks that you feel like are doing better than you are. And I love that because it shows me why they're who they are, right? They always believe there's something to learn. And then others can't see the forest for the trees. And so they get wrapped around the axle about, hey, I've got this deal stuck in the funnel. And you start asking the questions. And I'm usually starting with relational questions, not value questions. The truth is that there's typically in what I do, there's going to be an ROI or a reduced TCO. There's going to be a good financial story to tell, whether they say they can afford it or not. So it's really about, do they understand how their contact within a specific opportunity perceives what they do? I mean, what their job is internally.
Yeah.
It's funny. I mean, I'll deal with, what I would say folks further down in the org that think it's their mission to drive cost out of solutions. They don't get paid to do that. It's not in their job description, right? There's not a merit badge. No one's going to, but they can't translate where value really exists within the organization, right? So everything's different, and understanding where folks are aligned and helping them through that. I kind of went down a rabbit trail, but back to your question. I see especially among millennials, a need to understand empathy better. I see that, a need to understand ownership better. And, it's always amazing to me how I hear a rep going berserk about how something fell apart. Someone didn't do their job. The mailman didn't put the letter in the mailbox, right? Whatever. And then they'll end with, this affects my paycheck. Well, if it affects your paycheck, maybe there should have been more diligence on the front end in your expectation setting and your communication proactivity and your ownership through the sales cycle. So I think it comes back to helping them understand that things aren't mechanical. And I hate to say it, but helping them come to terms with the training they went through. It may or may not be the secret to their success, and that there's a lot that needs to be learned outside of what they've been, quote unquote, told to do.
Well, that's it. I think that people have tried to mechanize it so much with cadence tools and blog posts and the magic subject line.
Right.
And unfortunately, a lot of people haven't talked on the phone.
Yeah.
As high school, college people, they text.
Huge. Yeah.
Which is kind of, transactional.
Right. And it lacks context, which is everything. And it gets abbreviated with
synchronicity.
Yeah, you're dead right. And these items that you're keying in on, yeah, I've got so many thoughts. I'm trying to be guarded here, but
oh, now that's a challenge.
It is a challenge. I don't know if you've ever heard of Pat Bowden. He's an interesting pedigree. So CCIE, extremely technical, CPA, so great financial mind, CEO of a mid-market company, author, BODIN. So he has this great book called Get in the Boat, where he talks about, Brian, language barriers within business. And he basically, and this might not be PC today, but he goes through and he stereotypes 3 different types of folks that exist within any organization. You have your tacticians, your operators, and your strategists. Strategists typically C-suite, tacticians typically doers, and these operators that sit in the middle. He uses an analogy. He says, operators like the French press, right? The tacticians out there, and he's like, these beans came from Colombia and the mountains and the rich soil, and they have X quality, and then the executive's just like, I want coffee, and when I walk in, I want it to smell amazing. He doesn't care where the beans came from. So the French press is like what's taking the tactical and making it what feeds the vision or the strategy. So rough analogy, but he gives this story, and I think it's valuable to all of us to remember. He says a CEO of a Fortune 1000 company gets on an elevator. Gentleman gets on, he's in an especially good mood, right? The CEO. And gentleman gets on, young man, young lady, whatever the case may be, who works in the technology, IT sector of the business, the BU. And he says, good morning, how are you? And so the young technician says, doing great, very credentialed, paying him $250,000, right? And he says, what do you do for us? And he introduces himself, and the technician says, oh, I'm a triple CCIE, and I make sure that, we guard against DDS. And he goes down these lists of cyber attacks and a bunch of acronyms that CEO cannot understand or comprehend whatsoever. Now, CEO, sorry ask, can't wait to get to his floor, right? And he said, but if this technical individual understood what they did for the company in the CEO's world, they would have said, well, I work within your information technology group. If I do my job correctly today, the new office in Boston will be up and generating revenue in the morning.
Boom.
Now he turns around and extends his hand. What did you say your name was again? And so we're guilty of that in sales. We don't understand our audience, and we speak language that immediately puts us in a box that we're not ever going to get out of once we're there. And so we need to move to that middle and understand how to speak to both the tacticians and the strategists. And young people will struggle with that, and they don't understand the dynamic, and helping them along through that, I think, has been really valuable in some of the mentoring I've done.
And do you have a hack or an exercise that helps you with that?
Oh, wow. That's so you have to be careful because title is deceiving.
Yeah.
But you do need to also make sure that you at least see how the field appears to be chalked. So you do look at title, and then you look at personality and aspiration. There needs to be a conversation had that's personal before you get to professional, if at all possible, just to understand the human element and psyche of who you're talking with, and try not to solution and or sell in everything that you're doing.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, this is a hack that I try to teach people, because we have this portfolio and we know it frontwards and backwards, and we know the value, and we know why you should buy it and why you should do it soon, right? But the truth of the matter is, in conversation, as details and as the conversation lends itself to us understanding they have a need, we typically want to go directly to that catalog, right?
Right. Transaction.
Oh, immediately, which is so devaluing and such a turnoff to a human individual that took time out of their day to share a lunch with you, right?
Yeah.
And they have a family at home, and they're trying to do what they do, right? And they have career aspirations, and so you immediately are going for this. Buy this now, and that's what you were trained to do. When you hear these buzzwords, here's your battle card, right? And that's what you're trained to do. But that slowing down to speed up is huge. So I would say, it's much better to circle back with a 48-hour thank you phone call. And by the way, when you mentioned XYZ, I thought of ABC, and I wanted to circle back. It could probably be valuable if I could connect you with so-and-so. How does next Thursday look? It's just at that point in time, it's appropriate, and it might not have been originally.
And I think what's great about that is that's not transactional.
Yeah.
Because if you make it transactional, it will be transactional.
Yeah.
and it'll be
I'm
you
very
against
binary. Yeah.
the other three people who do something that sounds pretty much the same.
Yeah, you're right. So, I mean, these are kind of just raw Brian unrehearsed, but I think, where I'm at and how I see the world, you've extracted some of who I am in this call. Yeah.
And would you consider that kind of that empathy your superpower, if there was one?
I would. And I'll tell you how I came to that conclusion. It wasn't just because you asked me. So I was in an absolutely awesome training. There's a group based out of Cincinnati called Team Performance Institute. It's led by a ex-Navy SEAL, John Sanchez. This guy's just rock star. Navy SEAL. He's not letting you off the hook for anything, right? And so I'm in this session, and John's like, he's pretty compelling. He says, I want you to think back over your career. You're all here because you are fantastic at what you do. And I want you to just start itemizing every character trait, every nuance, differentiator that you think you possess that has contributed to your success. And at first this became hard. I'm like, I'm not sure, what to say here, but I'm like, well, I have a great work ethic. I can walk and chew gum. I have a double-digit IQ, and I have some EQ, right? Double threat guy, right? So you start naming these things, and empathy made my list. And so we're done. And now you have like a dozen or so things. And he says, now I want you to pare it down to 5, that if you could only have 5 traits, I'm not asking you what has made you most successful, but which of the 5 would you now esteem higher than others, right? And you know where this is going. Then 3, and then he asked you to single out the 1. And I couldn't get away from empathy. And what I realized it wasn't necessarily my strongest at the time, but I think it is now.
Yeah.
I think I've been consciously competent in developing that. Yeah.
Cool. Hey, Brian, I really appreciate your time today. Where can people go to connect and follow you?
Man, LinkedIn is best for sure. And I really prefer that. So no websites or subscriptions or anything yet.
No front door?
No home address, right? But yeah, I'd love to connect with on LinkedIn, and love to hear from other professionals. And I appreciate you asking.
That empathy, how do you become good at it? It does take a conscious effort, because when we're under pressure, when we have our KPIs, our metrics, and our quota to make, what does that do? It focuses in on what we want and need. But that doesn't really help us sell. It may give us some activity, some initiative, some get up and go, but it doesn't help us think like the client. And one of my laws is, if you know what's going to happen, you know what to do, which requires this advanced cognitive thinking ahead. As mammals, we're really good at thinking in the moment, surviving, getting something to eat, sleep, fight off, freeze, flight, or fight, one of those things. But what happens about tomorrow? Tomorrow, we'll worry about it then. Well, the problem is you never really prepare then. And if you've learned anything from the podcast, the complex sale is a sequence of traps wrapped in a big trap. A trap of time wasting, of false positives, of hurry up and wait, of no decision, maybe later, next quarter, we'll buy as little as possible. Maybe we need to start all over again. We didn't rethink through this. All of these things are traps, and we gladly fall into them. Oh, yeah, Brian. They're definitely going to buy. Oh, yeah, don't you? Oh, my champion, they know exactly what to do. What? They're not calling me back. If you don't prepare, which is a little bit of empathy, a little bit of like, what's going to happen? What has happened before 1,000,000 times? Now, this is different when you have an existing customer and they need it, and it's more like order taking. Yeah, you're doing some creative stuff and building rapport and everything, but they're probably going to buy it this week or next week, no matter what, or who's on the other end, maybe from a competitor. I'm talking about that new deal with the new customer where you're competing against doing nothing or a bunch of competitors. and there's a lot at risk. It's change for them. And they may not buy anything at all. They may just stick with old status quo. But the problem with all of this stuff is you may feel like you didn't lose the deal, but you didn't get a commission check either. And that's why we're doing this. Remember that? So empathy has to be developed. And so you're like, well, how do I do it? Okay, I can give you some examples. If you're playing a game that forces you to anticipate steps ahead, this will develop your empathy, your anticipation, your predictive skills. And I've always used chess because what's great about it, and especially today, is you don't need somebody on the other end. There's a computer, there's your smartphone, your iPad, tablet, and you can play as long as you want. You could play against a real human being, but the computer's pretty good. It will help develop this skill. And what you'll find is you're not that good at first. It takes a while. This is advanced thinking. And we don't really get taught this in school. We get a little bit of it at home, especially if you're an older sibling or you have to take care of a pet or another person. And a pet is a great way to build empathy because there's no communication there. You can't ask your doggy or your cat, are you sick? And if I had a cat, and I remember the cat had fleas one day because it wanted to go outside and play, and came in and gave me this look like, I'm in pain. And then I go, what's wrong, buddy? And, you get down and they go, oh, we got some fleas. So you got to get the comb out and, get the medicine and put the medicine. Oh, you're not going to like the medicine right in the back of your neck. But what it does is it makes you have to think, what's wrong? Is it serious or is it cosmetic? These skills are going to make the difference between you knowing what to do because you're in the trap. You're in the hearing what you want to hear space, even hearing what's being said. There's a sales intelligence product out there. It's like, only reality, no more opinions. Reality? What is reality in human decision? Reality, they don't even know reality sometimes. Like when you're in market for something, it goes from interested to action. That's the individual sale. And a company, it's just this long string of interested action and turning into urgency. Is it based off of words? Maybe. Words are part of it, but more it's about building up enough interest and urgency till action is taking place. The acid test of action. Until you have action, they commit to something. They do something. They show up. They respond. That's an action. Words are nice, but words, I bet 80% of them are a little too optimistic. They're telling you, and they're not lying. They're just being a little bit optimistic, should we say. And they don't know what it takes internally to get it done. And when you've done these large complex sales for 25 or 30 years, and when you fails, if you put 3 months, 6 months into a deal and you don't get it, that tuition, and you're talking about, 5-figure commission check out the window. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, little BMW that just drove away that you could have had. You were inches away from getting it, but you don't have. That's when you learn. And if you're smart. If you don't learn from that, and what I learned was it was just one big trap. And I had the good fortune of working with very experienced salespeople very early in my career. And probably the best people I've ever had the opportunity to work with over my career. Because most of the companies I went to after that, they weren't that good. They were very transactional, very push, close hard, get something done, get as little done as possible, get something done. And that's okay, but that's not where the big checks are coming from. The big checks come from when you get big deals. But big deals are just one big trap after another. And we don't realize we're in the trap until we can't get out. And that's all the calls I get, most of the one-on-ones in the closing the complex sale are people in the trap, and it's really hard to either get out and repair it or admit that you're in the trap. The whole course is about how not to get in the trap. And people say, well, that's a little bit of work. Well, it's a whole lot less work than trying to get out of the trap. If you're trying to build a house, once it's built, that's not the time to put the foundation in. You got to have that foundation in first. And if the foundation doesn't settle right, don't start building on top of it, because you're just going to build, push down, build, push down, build, repair, build, repair, build, repair. You're much better off building in a stack and doing it right the first time. And that's when something will stick. The natural thing is, cut corners, believe what you want to hear, and then it doesn't happen. Did I tell you about the breakthroughs that we're having and start the conversation, get the meeting? This course is a game changer because I'm finally being able to convey to the new students that come in, the new people, what it is. It is a skill. It's not just knowledge. If you take the approach of knowledge, you're going to miss. You'll get better results, but you're not going to get the results. The true outcome of it is your ability to take your total addressable territory, whatever it is, and be able to have conversations with the other person that you can then turn into business conversations. This is a skill that's not taught anywhere. What I'm trying to take is 25, 30 years of sales experience of cold approaches and break it down into a repeatable process that anyone can learn. I've got a couple people who English is a second language who are doing it, who aren't salespeople. I've got people right out of college or in college doing it right now for me. Friends' kids, people that are learning, and they all fight it. Everyone fights it because why don't I just ask? Why don't I just pitch? Why don't I just send this email? Make it personal and relevant like I heard on LinkedIn. Well, it doesn't work. If it worked, those people would be rich. What you need to do is be able to start where they are. When I mean that is like, do they know you? Do they have the problem that you solve? Do they care about it? Are they aware of it? Is there any latent pain about it? But the key is people always want to talk about their favorite subject. Your product. No, not your product. Themselves. So if you want to develop this skill, and it is a skill, it's a performance. Sales is a performance. Anyone can pass the sales test. Few can sell because they have to practice it and understand where they are. That empathy. If I was to ask salespeople, are you empathetic? 99% of the hands would go up. Yet 5% are crushing it. Which one do you want to be? Sales is the type of career that is insanely fun when you have success and kind of miserable when you don't. Invest in yourself. You are the means of production. To learn about the courses, you go to b2brevenue.com. There's a frequently asked questions video in there where I put in the answers to every question I've gotten so far. If it still doesn't answer it, send me an email. Most of the 15-minute calls have been booked. I apologize for that, but everyone loves to talk. But I can't really remember the last time I had a 15-minute call and I didn't answer a question or the answer wasn't already in the frequently asked questions. There's 2 payment models. You can pay all at once It's a year-long access to the content. How long does it take you to become good at it? I've seen people within a month or two become good, but it's a process. How long does it take to become good at talking? We're all doing it. This is what we are. We're professional communicators. It's a lifelong development process. And you could pay all at once or in 12 monthly payments. It's not a subscription. No matter how much you want it to be, it's not. So when I say on the website, not a subscription, that's what I mean. Okay? So it's a commitment. If you're cheap or lazy, you're not going to be happy because it costs money and you got to do some work. Yes, I lay it out. I give hundreds of examples. You get office hours, an hour meetup every other Friday. You get unlimited one-on-ones, 30-minute Zoom calls with me. They're all recorded and put in the course. You never miss a minute of the content. So if the time zone doesn't work, you can send your questions ahead, and I'll answer them in the office hours. There's close to 3 years of them in there already. You don't have to consume all of them. You consume them as you wish, as time allots, as your interest is piqued, as the applicable content and Q&A and issues match what you're facing. What could be better? Brian's here working for you 24/7. Did you tell a friend about the show? Are you liking and commenting on my content? Please do that. I only have a few connections left, so that's probably why I'm not responding to a lot of them. I hate getting into I've accepted my max, and now somebody comes in and is like, why aren't you accepting? Okay. But if you don't like, comment, and share my content and I see a connection request, it's probably not going to get connected. I don't know you. You're not a giver. Sales is a giving profession. We think it's a taking profession, but the best people learn it's a giving profession. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.